Thank you all for being here today for the launch of our strategic plan. As you'll see on the slide, we have the name of the plan. Now, when you try to name a strategic plan, most of the options are awful. Most of the awful options came from me. Luckily, Christy knows how to just give me a look at this point, and I realize I'm having an awful idea and I step away from it. But there was this one point where and I actually don't remember who said it, but someone had said, you know, this really feels like our moment. That shows respect for what's happened before, but that something is different now. Something is going to build on all that great work that was before, but it's not just the same thing. It's our chance to really reach our aspirations. And so when we heard that name, we thought, all right, let's test it out a little bit. And no one made a face in the same way that they had at all the other names. And then literally in a meeting when I was like, maybe this is the right name, Larry Zachary's in a meeting said, you know, this is our moment. And I felt like that was a sign. So this is our moment, and this is our strategic plan. So I first want to just say this is 18 months, 24 months. I have no idea how long we've been doing this at this point. But there are so many people that have contributed to this. I would like to just take a moment and ask the steering committee, if you're here, to please stand up and particularly thank Tom Manuel and Jenny Williams, who are our committee chairs. So if you all will just stand up for a second. And honestly, a person I really wish could have been here today is Rose Martinelli. Many of you were here and worked really closely with Rose through Project Reach. Without Project Reach, there is no strategic plan now. And so all of this has come together to get us to this point. And this is also a moment of personal reflection for me. I'm someone who doesn't always know what to do when things are good. When I fail or I screw up, or I know exactly what to do. I'm ready. It's almost like I like it. But that idea of appreciating a moment is not something I'm great at. And when we do assessment, one of the things, and we've kind of argued about this a little, is the idea of continuous improvement. Well, you better have a provost who believes they can always continuously improve. And so the idea of thinking about how do I get a little bit better at appreciating the positives, appreciating where we are. There's plenty of time to be able to think about where we're going next, particularly when you have an amazing president like President McGinnis, who is always 3 steps ahead and always leading that vision. There's always time to do it. But I do, just for a minute, for myself and for all of us, want us to just appreciate where we have come and where we are going and everything that this plan can and will mean to us. So just to give you a little bit of a roadmap, there are a few ways you can do a strategic plan. Honestly, if I had my own way, which luckily I didn't, it would be 312 pages. It would say everything we will ever do, and no one would ever read it or remember anything. This is an aspirational plan. It's got to be detailed enough to be meaningful, but it is one that sets the stage for what we'll talk about in a little bit later is an annual action plan. So what you have today, what's on your tables, is the postcard of the plan. It's some of the basics. I probably shouldn't have said that because now you're all going to read it. So please, just for me, one time, I'll never ask again, please forget everything I said 8 seconds ago. But it is a plan that allows us to get a big picture of what we're trying to do. And then every year, we hold ourselves accountable, we replan, we dig into those details, and we do that in the same way that we've developed this plan. This will not sit on a shelf, and I'll come to later how We have a responsibility as our administration, but I'm going to ask each of you to take on some of that too, to make sure that doesn't happen. And to the extent that we're not holding our part of that, that you hold us accountable. But the specific pieces here, starting from the mission of the university, which doesn't change in a strategic plan. We have our vision, our values, the priorities, which essentially are those 4 flag posts, the objectives, and our success measures. You can think of those as metrics. So those are going to be the key pieces that we'll go through today. And I do, as we think about this, one thing that we don't do so well as administrators, and I feel like we're starting to get a little bit better, is to appreciate all of the expertise we have on campus. And so for all of the things we do, we have experts on campus. And so an expert helped me understand that there's 2 ways to think about a strategic plan. One of those is the idea of a legitimacy story. Are we legitimate in the group that we believe we are in, that we want to belong in, and that we will be proud to be a member of? You can think about the AAU, you can think about being a top public flagship, but then there's also the idea of an advantage story. What are the things that are really unique about us? What are the ways in which we leverage what we're good at, where we have capacity, where we have strength, and nurture that? And we don't always do that as well as we could. Those that are doing well, we sometimes let them go off on their own, and we forget to support them too. So both of those are going to be critical as we think about all the pieces that go into this plan. So when you start with the vision, I guess at this point I'd have to, but I really like our vision. It really, and listen, it has evolved so much. Originally, if you remember, it was 3 pages. And what's left are what I believe are real pieces of a legitimacy story and real pieces of an advantage story. So we start right away with New York's public flagship. That's pretty new. So much has happened in the past year. It might be easy to forget that only recently happened. But that is a clear statement. And if we are a public university, you want to be the flagship. You want to be the institution that the state holds up as its pride, as where it's going to invest, and where it's going to have great expectations of it. So that's the first piece. Now, the second one's a little controversial. Not everyone loved it. A lot of people really liked it. I really liked it. There are some things that I lost the argument here, for sure, but this is one that I felt really strong about. I grew up not so far from here, and in the Northeast, my experience, and I came from a family where no one had gone away to college before, but there was this sense that a public university, a state university, didn't have the same quality as a private school. That was ingrained in me so much that I didn't just get the message, you have to go to college, you have to go to a private school. And this idea of how good we are, that we are a first choice. Now, we have some work to do. This is a vision. This is where we want to be in 5 years. But imagine where we will be when all of our students, they are excited about getting into Stony Brook. That when they have a great semester, they think, wow, I'm set up to really succeed here, not where can I transfer that's better. These are challenges that I think we're getting through, but this is our moment to really get through that, to where students are really excited about being here. But it's not just students, and I know it sounds like students, but think about our staff. Think about these days how many other opportunities staff have outside of academia. So many of you stay here not because you don't have other options. In fact, I'd argue we might be the closest in any of these in our staff in terms of this being a first choice, because there are real choices, and we have a lot that we have to do over the next 5 years to make our staff feel like that was the right choice, that staying here, that they don't stay here because it's their only option, it is their best option. And we are clear about how you progress and how you truly feel like all of that effort that our staff put in is worth it. But think about our faculty. I know from the minute I got here, we really are good as faculty at thinking about we are as good as anybody else. And so we are. So how do we ensure that when some big fancy school comes to try to take and poach one of our faculty, that we know we're going to make a competitive counteroffer and they're going to stay? How do we know that when we're up against what some might say is the best school in a particular area, that we are able to compete successfully for that person? And we are giving our faculty the opportunity, our faculty who are tenure track, our faculty who are professional track, that all of our faculty have the ability to succeed, that our adjuncts feel like this is a great opportunity to teach 1, 2, or even more classes here. So if we can be that first choice in 5 years, that changes almost everything. It would have an enormous impact on our retention and our graduation rates. It would have an enormous impact on everything that we talk about. I would like it so that, even just in New York, that if a student isn't from the city or Long Island, that no matter where they are in the state, they want to come to Stony Brook. And so that is in our reach. But that's an advantage story. That's more than just being legitimate in the state. It is we have a competitive advantage. So we think about this by driving innovation. We have a lot of ways to go as we think about who we are as a public flagship and the way in which that we are truly contributing to the state, the way in which we are supporting economic development, but particularly the way in which we support each of you in the innovative and thoughtful things that you're trying to do. It can be really hard if we are not prepared to support the innovation that you're trying to bring. So some of it is nurturing, some is making sure our promotion and tenure guidelines explicitly talk about the importance of innovation and entrepreneurship. But some of it is making sure that we're ready to provide that capacity for you when you take that opportunity. Inclusive excellence. Think about anti-racist pedagogy. Think about what are the ways in which we are one of the only majority-minority universities within the AAU. What does it mean to still say we're not where we want to be? That there's more that we can do, that there is more that we can do to attract the most talented Black, Indigenous, and Latinx students to our university where our numbers lag. That there is more we can do to ensure that our students see faculty and staff that look like them, that are able to share lived experience in a way that complements everyone being more culturally competent and sensitive. What does it mean to truly be transformative in research, healthcare? I mentioned economic development, but also if we think about the arts and the humanities, what is the cultural development? How we always talk about universities being the front porch, parts of the university being the front porch. We often talk about sports, and that's athletics is a place, we have an amazing women's lacrosse team. We have a lot of areas we can grow there, but we have amazing arts. We have amazing ability in what we've done to do teacher prep and K through 12, what's happening over at the health center and across the entire state. These are impactful. And then the biggest advantage story that we have is social mobility. There is no other school that brings what we bring in those first few pieces and does it with social mobility front and center. And we can double down on that. I have this fantasy that I will get a $25 million gift and we will develop an innovation and entrepreneurship center for students that's focused on access and equity. These are things where we can really double down. So this is the vision of where we want to be in 5 years. So everything that we do has to be thinking about, does that align with us getting there? Because quite frankly, in 5 years, we could still have achieved a lot, but really not be where this is. This is intentionally a challenging goal, but it would be transformative. So, values. This is sometimes a part of a strategic plan where the only thing notable about it is a clever acronym. We have no clever acronym. That is, it kills me. I really wanted a clever acronym. Christy said no. She said maybe we should actually just have the values that are the right answer. And so as we think about how we approach these values, I will say I've been doing this little experiment in meetings, particularly where we are trying to decide about two different options. Because one of the painful things about being provost, not that I should complain, but one of those is that sometimes you put options against each other that are both central to your values. But a lot of times, one of them really is central to your values and the other isn't, but you don't realize it. You get so stuck on one thing and how you might do something. But when you force yourself to ask, is this option going to develop our excellence? Is this about where we are trying to go? Is this about equity? I mean, just as a very quick example, I am really, really invested in the idea and hands-on experiences for students. And some of the ideas that I've had would greatly expand them because I'm thinking about scope. But unless they are paid, unless they are done at times in other ways where students who might otherwise have to work, who might otherwise not have the same level of access, we're just creating a disparity. Unless we think about the faculty and staff who are taking on extra burden, because we know who you all are. You take on a disproportionate amount of that. I see Peter right there. I don't mean to point you out, but I am. Many of you do that, and if we're not careful, we're creating disparities. We're creating a situation where, and particularly for our faculty and staff who are from traditionally marginalized groups, when there are students who really want to be able to work with you, it puts a lot of pressure, it puts a lot of strain, it puts a lot of labor. So we always have to keep asking, is what we are doing actually preserving equity? I am obsessed with policy and procedure. I'm embarrassed by myself because when I was primarily a faculty member, I never thought about it. What was the next thing? What was exciting? And now I know that if we don't have good policy and procedure, if we don't really invest in it, we can't have equity because folks don't know what the expectations are. I don't want to make a strategic decision in a moment to decide what to do because we didn't put the work in to have the right policy and procedure so someone would know what the actual answer was. That's maybe strategic. I just think it's a breeding ground for inequity. So when you have to make tough decisions about do you invest there, when I think about this, it tells me we do. If you think about collaboration, do we do it by ourselves? Do we let red tape and other things be the reason why some of us on East or West Campus are more likely to work with someone at another university than we are actually with the person across the street? Because the street is separated by an enormous row of red tape. Those are things that we have to think about, and that would tie into what's the structures we're creating. And then finally, are we being innovative? Are we doing it the same old way? Are we actually thinking? Now, it doesn't mean we change just to change. And there's a lot of times where we shouldn't change because it's actually not valuable to do that. It creates new issues. But there are all sorts of times where we have that option. So are we open to that? And then I actually tried to take community out of this plan so many times, and I'm wrong. I realized that by the end because it kept coming back. Now, I think it was a sort of a weird part of speech thing that I couldn't, like, was it a verb, was it a noun? And I think I got stuck on that. But we ended up from me trying to take it out to it becomes the centerpiece of all of it. So are we treating each other the way that each of us deserve? And is Stony Brook actually a community? And that's something that over the next 5 years, hopefully that answer just gets more and more clear. So what I just did was explain the next 5 slides. So I'm going to actually jump through them because I've said all of it. So now we get to our priorities. Again, priorities are those flagpoles. You know, what are the things that really set out what we want to accomplish? And if we do that, will we have achieved our vision? Now, these are really good examples of legitimacy stories. I'd be a little nervous if our 4 priorities looked really different than other places. But where it becomes different, where it becomes unique, is in the objectives, in the way we take those priorities and we focus on where our strengths are. So starting with transforming learning and teaching. Now, we had a lot of conversations about the word transforming. And I think we even still have a little bit of a healthy skepticism. What does it mean to transform something? In the end, we thought what we're trying to accomplish, if we've done that, it will be different. And there will be ways to measure that. But I do think we want to still have that healthy skepticism. And even within that idea, there are things that are just more about doing things the old-fashioned way, the right way, the way that has a certain purity to it. So as much as we have the transforming piece here, it is as much about also the things that got us into this in the first place, the things that led us to want to work with students and be able to help them develop. So expanding student access. This is an example. Other places talk about this. We're really good at this. But what are the ways in which we leverage that even more? When students leave here, we know from research that when students are surrounded with more diversity across a variety of intersectionalities, they are more prepared for the world. We have that opportunity here, but that also requires us being creative about ensuring that students have the kind of meaningful experiential opportunities that allow a true kind of communication and a true opportunity for your mind to grow and to understand. And so how do we do that? The next is fostering student success. We're very unique in that our first gen and Pell students graduate at least at the same rate, or in some more recent data, at a higher rate than our other students. So there are a lot of things that we're doing right as we think about fostering our success. One of the things, and I mentioned it before, it's hard to fully tease out this data, but for some of our students, they leave us when they're doing well. So how do we think about really digging in and engaging our students so that, again, this is their first choice and this is where they are. And some of that is us providing the resources and the support for things you all are already doing and know work. Supporting innovative and inclusive pedagogy. What are the ways? And so listen, there's some obvious, simple things. We need to have an approach for how we address team teaching, for interdisciplinary opportunities in the classroom. Right now, we have as many cases where it feels like, and I'll use this word loosely, you're punished for trying to do something creative or thoughtful. There's things we can do about that. We can't do everything, but certainly if we put our mind to it, we can think about how we can accomplish that. Enhancing experiential learning, I like to think about 5 areas. So research, you should never say a number because then if you don't remember one of them, you're messed, but I think I'm pretty good on these. Research, study abroad, internship, service learning, and entrepreneurship. So what are the ways in which, when our students leave, we've made them better people, we've opened their minds? When we think about our graduate students, and I always want to be careful when we're talking about students, in my mind, all of these are relevant to our undergraduate and graduate students, but for many of our grad students, what they're doing by nature is experiential. But what are the ways in which we're supporting really strong mentoring? What are the ways in which we're giving grad students an opportunity to be interdisciplinary? And so when we think about these, how do we develop not just the students' emotional and personal and intellectual growth, but also their ability to succeed when they leave? And so finally, globally engaged leaders. I think this kind of ties into the other pieces. So as we think about each of these, what are the ways in which here at Stony Brook we can approach these uniquely and thoughtfully? So how do we measure that? Well, these are just some of them right now. We're going to be working through these as we develop the annual action plan. But obviously some of the key ones, retention and graduation rates, pass rates, graduate and alumni outcomes, student satisfaction. What we don't have here is assessment. I mean, there's a lot of other pieces that these are representative. There are more nuanced and really sophisticated ones as well that are more disciplinarily tailored. So this is partially the opportunity for us to have an overall plan, but not expect everyone to be the same. So now when we think about growing our research enterprise, so listen, it's great to say we're going to double this or triple that, but are we providing the support that folks need? Have we taken that 5, 10, 20% of friction that's in your lives out and made it easier to do the work you need to do? I also think we have a lot of work to do to understand what are the right disciplinary ways to approach this. It's easy to talk about grant dollars. And in some of your schools and colleges and units, it makes complete sense. But there is a coin of the realm in all of your disciplines. And we really need to understand and figure out what is that? What makes a great university or a great discipline across our aspirational peers? How do we measure that effectively? That's something we have to do together. We have a lot more work that we can do on that, but when we think about this, I want to be really clear. There are a lot of ways that we're simply just measured on grant dollars, but that cannot be the only answer. And if we're effective at this, instead of it being suffocating for half the campus, it can be inspiring. So we have a lot of work there. Interdisciplinary collaboration, I won't say more of this because I've already said a lot. I mean, I'll tell you, when I was interviewing for dean's jobs, this is a long time ago, I don't know if you've ever been in an interview within 10 seconds, you knew you weren't getting the job. They're not great, especially when they're an hour. I said I was really interested in thinking about interdisciplinary in the opening, I said, and someone stopped me and said, "So you don't care about disciplines?" That's when I knew it was over. What I've learned to say, because it's what I mean, is you can't have interdisciplinary without strong disciplines. But you then have to be open, thoughtful, innovative in how you use that as a base and not in its own right. But without the disciplines, you can't have interdisciplinary. And so how do we think about how we do that without eroding our actual disciplines? How do we ensure that we don't have so few faculty? I mean, we're a little unique, right? In that we're, in some cases, half the size of some other universities that we aspire to be or believe we are. And yet, we're expected to have almost all the same disciplines, all the same different areas. So we get spread in ways, it's harder to have that depth. So how do we make sure while we're being interdisciplinary, we're not starving our departments? Because that's not going to help either. So it's a combination of both, and that's something where the values can help. How do we think about both the local but then the global piece of what we're doing? If you think about Governor's Island and climate science and our ability to be a leader in that, what is the extent to which we're having an impact in New York because of this, but how are we becoming a global leader in that? We have a particular opportunity there, but in our other areas, and we always want to remember, we have many other areas and they're really strong. How do we make sure we are thinking about both of those? And then when we think about external partnerships, this is an area we have some real work to do. There's an economic development, they've done some really good things, they're working extremely hard. What we've done within the state is really strong, but part of that innovation is saying to the outside world that we want to partner, that we will still bring the rigor of an academic institution, but maybe not some of the inflexibility that we've seen in academic institutions. That's going to involve growing pains, but there's many of you who are ready to do that if we're able to do it. And it certainly will help the work that the Stony Brook Foundation is trying to do, not just in fundraising in the more traditional ways, but in bringing in some of those corporate partnerships as well. And if that helps us support the state economy, I mean, we can say we need to go to New York and really tell our story. But our story is really told when we're supporting a strong workforce. Our story is really told when we are making important partnerships and supporting the environment, and when it's really told when we're innovative. So here, we want to think about what are the ways that we measure excellence. Again, we sometimes default to the easy ones. Not the easy ones, but the easy ones to measure. And as we think about, will we have a new budget model at the university? We can't just measure things that way. We have to think, what does impact mean? What does it mean to actually keep our folks? There are many different ways to think about this. So these are the sort of things that we'll pay attention to. But as I said before, we actively want help in understanding how we appreciate and measure all of our disciplines. We have to have some way, but it doesn't have to be one size fits all. So as we think about now serving our communities as a public flagship, so it's great to be a flagship, but that comes with really significant responsibilities. And part of it is how we talk about ourselves. And when you really look at what we're doing, it's amazing. We are having a huge impact on Long Island. We are having a huge impact on the state. But it's usually the last thing we talk about. So we need to be sure that we're telling that story. Healthcare, and if you think about, you might be wondering, how is the Stony Brook Medicine Strategic Plan different or similar than this? It's the same thing as every other unit plan. It is really important in its own right, and it should all feed up through the overall plan. So that plan really develops what that means, but this is something where we have real opportunity to continue to be an impact on the state. Catalyzing economic development, I've talked a lot about that, so I'll jump from that. Advancing the educational ecosystem. We don't have a traditional school of education, so sometimes I think folks miss how much we are doing to support teacher prep. And if we think about things like the ACE program, where we're supporting students in high school getting a leg up by being able to take a few Stony Brook classes. We've got some plans right now to really expand in that, but if we do it, we have to do it in a way where we're supporting the departments who are providing the material for that and the training for that. But these are areas where we've had a huge impact. Confronting global grand challenges, obviously, again, we have the work that's happened at Governor's Island. But if you think about what I had mentioned before about there's so many areas where what we can do in STEM, what we can do in performance, what we can do in thinking about creating a just, thoughtful world where people are rational and they believe in facts and they believe in the importance of information and democracy. These are opportunities that we believe in, but we don't necessarily talk about how we can help the state in that way. And that's going to be a really important thing as a flagship. And then community and cultural engagement. I mean, we just appeared one day, right? Like 60 years ago, there wasn't like a master plan. It was like one day, here it is, enjoy. And that still kind of hampers us a little bit. And so being thoughtful, I will say what student affairs, what a lot of the units are doing in terms of ensuring students are getting a different sort of experience than maybe we've traditionally had here. And you talk to a lot of our students and they'll say, I've come here for the academics, or I live close, or I don't particularly think I'll have a lot of fun here. I mean, that was kind of the thought prior, but it's not now. There are ways in which, and when we think about some of our professional schools in the humanities and the way that we create a sense of culture and the way in which we have a vibrant community, that's still going to be a challenge, but this is going to be part of people wanting to be here. So we have to think about economic impact, quality scores for our healthcare, what are the way in which we're developing partnerships, alumni engagement, philanthropic giving, and obviously a $500 million gift doesn't hurt, and that's, I mean, there's a lot of energy in the system right now. And so now is a time where the conversations are different. So what are the ways where we don't just kind of default to that, but how do we actually leverage that? Earned media. My family loses their mind whenever anything on Stony Brook comes on. They live in New York, but they're like, oh my God, your school's on. But they never did that when I was anywhere else because they expected to see that. And so this change of who we are, I probably shouldn't say this on camera, but I will not allow myself to die before we become the University of New York at Stony Brook. It is my only mission. I think that will help a little, but just more about us being out there. And it's kind of nice when you see that because it's good to be a hidden gem for a little while, but it's our moment to be a gem. And so, and obviously in terms of sustainability, I just bought an EV. If you knew how much of a life change that was for me, this is, we need to have different expectations for ourselves around this. And there's ways we can do it. We have an amazing facilities group that is able to be a partner as we do this. In 5 years, if this works, we will not have this priority anymore. This priority is here because we have to acknowledge we have work to do. And people work really hard here. But sometimes our systems are driving what we are doing. We have redundancies built under other redundancies. I have to be in these kind of paternalistic roles sometimes where I feel like I'm suffocating the deans and the departments, and we can move away from that. And part of that comes out of trusting and respecting each other. Part of it comes out of ways to hold each other accountable. If we know how to do that, I don't have to watch over every second because there's trust, and we let each of you be leaders. We sometimes struggle with thinking, listen, I shouldn't be here. Someone from Stony Brook should be the provost. We will get to that point where we've given folks enough leadership opportunities because we have the people. We have amazing leaders here, but we haven't always given them the opportunity to shine and grow. So that's going to become really important. When we think about our staff, what are the ways, as I said before, how are we working with HR and developing leadership training for our staff? We have faculty development. 50 times we rewrote it as faculty and staff development, but we're still figuring out if we're going to say it, it has to mean something. And so we have work to do to really ensure, and HR is doing a lot in terms of starting to develop that, but we want to have that in place. We need to have more opportunities for staff to talk with each other, to be able to, many of you are doing the same job as someone else somewhere else, but we haven't created an ecosystem where you're not having to duplicate everything. So to what extent are we doing that? And when someone says to me, you don't have time for this, or you shouldn't be in the weeds like this, they're wrong. They're being thoughtful, they're being sweet, but they're wrong. If we're getting that wrong, nothing else matters. And I'm always going to feel, and I'm going to use this word intentionally, shame, until we have reached a point where we're getting it right more. I make a ton of mistakes with this. We just have to really decide this is a priority. And if we do this right, then it just becomes the culture, and it doesn't need to be in a strategic plan anymore. So part of that is recognizing things like the Stony Awards that the President's Office put together, things like having our distinguished professors give lectures that will be starting next semester. There's a lot of ways to do this. Infrastructure and facilities, listen, we can tell you till we're blue in the face. We were built 60 years ago. Many of the buildings were back then, they're all breaking. That's true, but it's an excuse too, I don't know, forget that, but it's just not gonna work. So we have to be thoughtful, we have to be intentional. And I have seen with Bill Herman, so many efforts across facilities to try to say yes, to figure out how to do things, to come together. We've got a long way to go, but it's also part of the other leadership's responsibility for us to be making sure our deans and department heads and other leaders actually are having a voice in where our priorities are. Upgrading and innovating our technology infrastructure. We have a lot of opportunities here now. We have a great new CIO. Every time he speaks, I feel like, okay, he cares about tech and he cares about people. And he didn't just end up in an academic setting. He is an academic. That matters. That's going to have an impact in how our tech grows and how we are trying to be able to think about things like high-performance computing. Long way to go in those. And then modernizing our processes and optimizing our policies. I don't know how to write that. We went 50 different ways to try to say, we just want to be clear about what the expectations are. We all want to be engineers. We want to think through what can go right, what can go wrong. And people can say, well, we can't always plan for what should happen, but most of the time we actually can. And so our leaders need to be doing that. It's not easy, it's not fun, it's extra, but it is so relieving when you come to something and it would have been a problem where it keeps you up all night because you don't feel like you're going to be fair no matter what you do, and you actually have a plan for it. Doesn't mean everyone's going to be happy, but at least it's fair. And so that's got to be something that we're thinking about. And then expanding our institutional resources. One thing that we are going to really focus on this year is trying to really get our student mix to 30% out of state and international. Now, there are many reasons why having a greater mix is good for the university. It creates more opportunities for us to be a more global and cosmopolitan university. It creates opportunities in what those students bring. It creates responsibility on our part to actually challenge ourselves when we say we're being inclusive, are we really being? It's going to be hard. We're traditionally at around 15%. Changing that alone would dramatically change the university. There are lots of these different pockets, but for many of us, we're just trying to keep up and we don't have the bandwidth to be strategic. We've got to figure out how to support you in having that bandwidth. Because we can keep asking the state for money. They came through this year. They may not always. So we can keep asking and get as much as we can right now, but it's got to set us, and we've got to get everyone out of deficit. Got to figure out how we get that right and allow you to have more autonomy and more responsibility. But with that autonomy, I think that becomes easier. So some of these are more subjective, self-report sorts of things, but they're important. Satisfaction. We could also look at attrition rates. Are we keeping people? Deferred maintenance, mention the retention rates, and then have we developed financial models? And listen, I'm not, sometimes that's code for we're about to cut you. We want to do it now so that we don't ever have to get to that point, so that we're thoughtful in how we do it. So the last thing I'll say, because of course I'm way over, is what's important now is how this all hangs together. So we have, when we say campus, I'm thinking here of the East Campus plan, school, college, divisional plans. We are really invested in having these plans over the next year. If you've just finished a plan, then you're done. You might look at this today and want to refresh little parts of it here and there. You may have waited to do your plan. Now's the time to do that. But what we really want to be able to do, and particularly as we get to the annual action plans, having your plan in place by the end of this year will allow us, as we go into the first action plan, to truly utilize them in what we do. We can talk about ground up, but honestly, most of the time it's just ground adjacent, and we haven't really done it. But if we have those plans in place, and we've been working with all of the unit leaders about what's the best way to be able to get that communicated to us, but we are taking it seriously. I've talked a lot about the annual action plan, but each year, okay, what are the sort of tactics? What are the things? And we're going to do an exercise after, and you might be wondering, why would we do an exercise when we're done? Well, it's because we're not done. And so as we start to think about that annual action plan, what are the ways in which what you're doing can contribute to how we get specific for the next year, and then each year after that? Part of it's also how do you go back to your units and live the strategic plan there. And if we are doing that at every level, we're in a pretty good shape. So then finally, this is kind of that other piece of how do we empower you? How do we create that autonomy that I mentioned? How do we create that opportunity, and how do we kind of build towards this idea of it being our moment? So with that, thank you. I've said this before, it's scary to leave a place. You wouldn't think so because I have a few times, but to come to a new place at this point in my career and meet a whole bunch of new people and try to learn while you're supposed to be responsible for leading is frightening. And from every minute that I've gotten here, I have felt supported. I felt like people respect me enough that when I get it wrong, they'll tell me. They'll be hard on me. And when we're trying to get it right, there is so much support. And I really believe this plan is going to help us get to that next level. And so I just want to say thank you for everything you all have done. And I look... I'm from New Jersey. I know better than to talk through my applause line, so I don't know. I'm sorry. And listen, I'm excited to be here through the 5 years of this plan and everything beyond it. Mari and I, the whole leadership, we are truly invested, and we feel what we get from all of you. And with that, I will stop. We'll take some questions today, but we have a lot more to do after this, and then we'll have our interactive session right after.
I have a simple question. I mean, this Stony Awards, which just launched, I have no idea what the target is. We have a Chancellor's Award and SUNY system, that there's various other awards in the university. These are the, who are the people who are targeting, acknowledging and honoring?
Yeah, so it's important to say one of the things that will happen at the awards is we'll acknowledge things like distinguished professors and other existing awards that we have now. There are certain areas where we already do that fairly well. We can always do more, and Monica Bagayo in our office is really focused on this. She's working really close with Miguel in the VPR's office. But part of this is really about supporting those who maybe aren't always seen. The work that is providing the support for a lot of the things that we do see. So we can always try to ensure that we're getting the message out as clearly as we can, and that's my responsibility to make sure the academic community understands that. So that's good feedback, and I can certainly try to make sure the vision of what was put together is really clear to all of you. But what I really do like about it, and what I think others maybe where and it's not to say faculty can't win some of these awards, but it's meant to be more of a broad-based award of a set of awards of a lot of the kind of foundational things that happen at the university. But we'll always take that feedback, and we'll try to always make sure that we're not just doing things, but particularly for me and the academic community, we're kind of making sure the why is there. Okay. Do we, just go ahead. I can repeat it, Leonie. Yeah.
I love your focus on community, right? It seems to me it's a real question about are we a community? One of the things we lack is a space for faculty to hang out, right? We don't have a faculty lounge. We don't have a bar. We need to do something, right, to facilitate these conversations that will promote interdisciplinary discussions, conversations. What are your thoughts on that? Will we ever get there? We used to have one in the ancient old days.
Yeah, so we tried to do it last year. Oh, sorry. So can we have a place where faculty and staff can come together more and have those kind of water cooler or just the kind of unexpected ideas together, build community that way? I think partially we pulled back a little bit because I think we're working on a culture now where we're trying to get things a bit more ground up in how we do things. And so, Monica and I, she's kind of working through the different things. It's not on the immediate list, but we're always open to come back to it. It was a real passion for her. I think it would be great. So I think that's the sort of thing where sometimes you try maybe it was too close to COVID. It could have been a lot of things. Maybe we didn't do it the right way. Maybe we need like a steakhouse vibe. I don't musty and, wood and, so we should think about it though. Thank you.
I have a question. Here. Right here. Sorry. First off, I want to start by saying thank you. This was a wonderful presentation. I am an undergraduate student, and I know that this is directed at our faculty, but I have a question actually about our alumni network. You talked a lot about community, which I think is great, but I have a question on how we build up Stony Brook, not as a stepping stone, as you mentioned, where people come in, they see that it's a strong university, and imagine it as a place to get to where they want to be, rather than the peak, where they want to be. So how do we build up an alumni network? How do we build up role models within our faculty and staff? And how do we make sure that from the first moment students come to campus, they feel like they belong?
That's a great question. And I think you can try to build an alumni network once they're alumni, but when you talk to folks who give or folks who follow or who care, it's because they remember some experience. What's not a mundane experience usually, it's something that transformed their lives. It was a set of experiences in a student club, or it was the way, for me, it was the way a faculty member taught me that I didn't have to try to be what everybody else wanted. I could just be okay with who I was. I remember that the rest of my life. That was actually someone from Stony Brook who was my mentor 1,000 miles away. So I think part of it is the quality of the experience that we have here. Some of it is as we develop the foundation and we have, quite frankly, more resources, we're able to provide more support to the folks working in alumni. Right now, they're really not supported in the way we could to be able to get that word out there. But I think it's everything here. If we were to do all of these things in 5 years, most of that would happen on its own, because you can't convince people of affinity. You've got to earn it. But I love the question. Thank you.
Hi. I tend to think of Brookhaven National Labs and Turkana and Madagascar and the new Climate Center as part of the Stony Brook umbrella, and it very definitely is. And I'm wondering, any thoughts to how we leverage those as part of this plan?
Yeah, and it is, these are in the plan. You can also think about SUNY Korea. We have, I think part of it is the way in which, first off, we're promoting those things, we're supporting them. And Pat Wright and I met this morning. Right now, Pat doesn't really have a whole lot of other support. She's kind of doing it on her own, and it's not because there aren't faculty and staff who would love to do it, to love to work with her. We just haven't figured out how to support her in creating that. TBI is an example of where we do that pretty well. And so I think part of it is looking at them on a case-by-case basis, making sure that we're actually providing sufficient support. But it is also, what are the ways in which our leaders have been to those places? I understand SUNY Korea much differently because I've been there twice. And I'm going to go to TBI this summer. I'll be going to TBI in the winter, CVB after that. But I'll even tell you, I spent a week in China a few weeks ago, and everything about my sense of international recruitment totally changed. So part of it is making sure we really understand what's there and then figure out how do we build it into those things. But some of it, and listen, I probably should have said more about some of those places even here. And I think the point is we have to keep treating it as it is central to here, even if it's not located here. I will say the Collaborative for the Earth, one of the really exciting things that the group is talking about is how do we take all of those different global locations who have very different, unique needs, and then develop solutions that are global but have local impacts. So I think when you start thinking that way, you naturally will realize you want to leverage those things. But some of it is really just making sure that we are prominently putting it out there and we truly know what it offers. I think we're working on that. Thanks.
So let me start by saying I really love Leonie's question. It means a whole lot to me personally, but it raises another question about students. And do students have physical community spaces that make them want to stay here and build memories on weekends versus getting on the train and going away? I think this is one of the essential problems that we need to solve for Stony Brook. And I would really like to say solve for the University of New York. Long live the University of New York.
Well, and even when you say that, we also want to think about, are we ensuring we're doing that for students in Southampton? Are we ensure? So I will tell you, literally in the past week, I've seen 2 presentations from both our RICs and Student Affairs, and it has been literally on that. I mean, Rick McClendon spent 30 minutes yesterday in the Stony Brook Council meeting talking about the new spaces. We're thinking about, I don't know if I can say this out loud, but thinking about getting a bronzed Wolfie. What does that mean in terms of building traditions? It's just a small thing, but those traditions matter. And having those spaces, I'm going to try and join one of the esports teams. I feel like it might be a good way for me to blow off some steam. Maybe we could have like student faculty esports tournament. It does matter, Paul, you're right. I mean, and we think about a building that you all are in, you can have students congregate there and work together. It just can't happen. And so part of it is figuring out, we had this new SUNY provost. He is not going to start, and president of the Research Foundation. He doesn't start for another month or so, and he was here for a few days. And honestly, don't tell anyone, we're his favorite. Like, he's very clear, like, he loves Stony Brook the most. But he also got to see all of those challenges. So we've got to be creative in what we have, because it can't change overnight. And then we've got to really help the state understand that one building a year just isn't going to work anymore. And so that's what we'll try.
I think I'm up. This is great. I really appreciated your remarks, and I appreciated in the time we've worked together on the labor management side of the table as the union rep in the room, how you're an accountable person, and you want to be held accountable, and you are willing to admit when you got things wrong, and you want people to say when you got things wrong. So how can we, as members of the university community, hold you and the broader administration accountable to this plan? That's question 1. And question 2, you mentioned more housing on campus. I presume that means for students, right? And of course, recruitment and retention of faculty and staff. One of the biggest challenges for that is something that's not necessarily, it isn't actually, this administration's fault, right? The cost of living on Long Island, the cost of commuting, of owning a vehicle, getting here in one way or another. How does that potentially factor into the strategic plan, addressing that? Because we could get tons of money from the state to jack up salaries, rent, mortgages, groceries, gas, it's all going up and will continue to go up. And we have, in our union contract, location pay, which helps address this to an extent. Yeah. But what can you do, and how does that factor in? So 2 questions.
I've forgotten the first one already. So just prompt me real quick.
How are we going to hold you accountable? How can we hold you accountable to this plan?
Good. So I remembered it, but I just, always had, 2 is actually pretty good for you, Andrew, I have to say.
It is. I'm trying. I'm working on it.
I mean, the way you hold us accountable is in events like this, but it's also the email that you send. And part of it is the enthusiasm. If you all believe this is real, and you're putting work in, we don't have a choice, because you're expecting that. People are asking, when is the annual action plan coming out? I am intentionally saying it over and over, so if a year from now we don't do it, I've lied. I mean, that is intentional to try to hold that accountability. So I think we believe in it, so I hope you don't have to. But this idea of, like, I love that people tell me what they think here, but I probably still don't get it enough. I still think we haven't figured out what are the forums. You know, we shouldn't have, sometimes we need the proper stuff. And I'm excited for the President's State of the University. That shouldn't be a free-for-all. But we should have other opportunities that can be, where those questions happen, where we are really pushed. We get that in Senate a little, but maybe we can work on, I keep thinking, should I have like a monthly academic affairs forum and just talk about what we're thinking and get real feedback? Because we'll make better decisions. So I think we will, and if we don't, then I hope people call us on it. In terms of the housing and the cost of living, so let's assume some of the plans I talked about work out, and so we're not only making a better place, we're bringing in more revenue. There's real questions there. Do we spend every dollar on bringing in more people? Or do we say we're going to spend 85% of it on more people and 15% on getting everyone else's salary up? That's a strategic decision. If we're lucky enough to be in that situation, we have a responsibility to figure out ways to actually get feedback. And quite frankly, part of it's making the whole community complicit in a hard decision. Because there is no right answer, because one unit might have gotten 2 more faculty if we had done 100%, or had gotten that staff member. Hopefully, we'll have enough that we can do both, but we can do more to include you all meaningfully in a consultative way early on, and we're thinking about ways to do it. I love what the budget team is trying to do in terms of being really, really open about what's in the budget, but there's a lot more. And so we'll keep trying to figure out how to do that. In terms of the housing, some of it will be students, but we're also talking about housing for early career faculty and for graduate students. And one of the challenges is it's really expensive to also build and to put stuff here. And so, but those are conversations that will do better. And by the way, we have experts in that here. So are we including those folks? Are we actually truly being a community? So I think we will be, and I would say to hold us accountable on both.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sean, and thank you so much for your presentation. I came in a little late, but I tuned in on your Zoom, so thanks so much for having that sort of platform. Based on your last answer, I really love the way that you approached that answer, and it kind of did answer part of my question that I was going to ask. Now, I'll give you a fact. On June 1st, there was an announcement in 2023 that the Simmons Foundation donated $500 million to Stony Brook University. Now, that's a huge injection to the university itself, and that's amazing. I applaud that. Me, myself, I'm an undergraduate student. This is my first semester here. It's only been like 6 weeks, but I found this event very, very interesting, and it makes me wonder where the annual action plan is gonna go and how it's going to pan out and follow through. So my question is, the strategic plan that we want to incorporate into the future, you mentioned how it would be. I'm a numbers guy, so basically I loved when you did kind of fractionalize, it would go X amount of percentage to this field, to this category and such. Now, $500 million is a lot of money, and the facilities and the support and the staff and administration could do a lot of wonders. So, also, I'm so sorry. This is kind of sideline. He also actually mentioned a great thing about the alumni network. I did a quick search on what Harvard does for their alumni connections, and they have Harvard Key, which is their, I don't know, their platform and such, and they probably invested in a lot of money in a SaaS software to incorporate that into the university website or the platform and the back end. So I feel like that could be like a cool little thing that Stony Brook will do. I also did check if Stony Brook does have an alumni directory. They do have an alumni directory. I feel like we could get a refresher on that and make it really attractive. And also that bronze idea was amazing. I think it was kind of cool. Back to the question. The question is, for the annual action report, what are some like dates and what are the follow-up dates that we can really follow through? Because you did mention how emailing is an effective approach to keep us in the loop of things. So when is the next event or when is the next?
Yeah, no,
follow-up?
listen, I think that kind of summarizes the question really nicely. So one of the positions that the president has talked about is essentially the person who will be in the role Rose was in prior. And she is really good at this sort of thing. And so it will provide a lot of bandwidth for how we ensure this is happening. And so the mid to late spring every year is where we will start to have things coalescing. We want to have it out every year. Yeah. Everyone, yeah. We knew this was happening. I forgot to tell you.
This is just a test. No need to go anywhere.
I'm just going to talk right through it. So, all right. Stand up to the bullies. Anyway, so yeah, so I think through the late spring, but we want to make sure you all have it going into the summer because you want to give you a chance to think about, okay, what will you do with this? We want to be able to go into the fall with that information. Then in the fall, we have the opportunity to look at how we did the previous year and provide those outcomes. There's a few different ways we might do that, but we will certainly be doing that. And then in terms of the money, so one of the things about an endowment is you don't ever touch the principal, but that will generate a lot of money in 1 to 2 years from now. So it's a little bit into the future. Now we want to make sure with those type of resources that we are using it in a way that the donors intended. These can be strategic things, but they can be things that are also foundational, the extent to which we're investing in particular faculty positions or the way in which we may be supporting some of our units with more staff to be able to think about how they're able to achieve their goals better. Some of it will be at that level too, but hopefully we're able to do these other things we talked about and we could really hold that money for these kind of bigger picture things that will help. But I will tell you, if it's 3 years from now and we have a lot of big ideas, but we don't have enough staff or we don't have what people need, that's not going to work. So we have to balance it. We have to be mindful of what the opportunities of that are and not squander that. But we also, if we really mean that fourth priority, one of the reasons I wanted that up there is I can't look at folks in a straight face a year from now if we've not addressed some of those issues and say that we meant that. So that's part of the holding accountable.
Hello. So I'm also an undergrad student, and that's my first semester as well. So when you talk about the priorities, the very first thing that you talked about was the expanding student access. And we know we have a very big student population at the school, So as we have a big population, we're going to have a lot of different populations of students that have different needs. Are we going to have a specialized student bodies that will work on like, okay, this is a student community and these need this resources. So we're going to have centralized resources for those communities. Do we have existing bodies, or are we going to work for the bodies like to have more centralized resources?
Yeah, so I know that student affairs and global affairs have done some of that work, but particularly, just come back to international again. If we do return to the levels we were at with international students, we have a responsibility to support them. So let me just give you an example that will be related. We made a strategic decision this year to have a few hundred additional new undergraduate students. In the past, we've had cases where we didn't have capacity for those students. Students had to take summer classes, then pay for them because we couldn't get them into all the classes they needed. We knew there would be some additional resources from doing that, so ahead of time, we took a part of it and said, we're gonna figure out, we did a lot of analytics, where there would be a strain in capacity, and we provided TAs and other support to those units. Our biggest ask this year that the President's office supported was a dramatic increase in advisors over the next few years. And so some of it is just having those basic resources in place more. As we do these analytics, we have, Braden Hosh is the best data person that any university could have. We're prepared. And so those strategic meetings, those preparations, the deans supporting us, better communication, means in some cases, yes, we already know there are groups, there are affinities that we need to support. In other cases, there's more similarities than differences. Some groups may be more impacted by, say, not enough advising, or in the past where we maybe haven't had as many resources for mental health. As we have more now and everything that they're doing, that helps particular groups with disparities. So part of it is being aware, listening when we're missing something, but most of it is being proactive, identifying the trends first, doing something about it before it breaks, and actually just raising the basic level of services will particularly help students with vulnerabilities.
One last question.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm also an undergraduate student, an exchange student from London, and a big part of my university's mission is also dedicated to the current climate crisis. Now, I've got an email from the university recently that we've been given the challenge to solve, or here Stony Brook has been given the challenge to solve the climate crisis. And I wanted to ask why I don't see it in the mission statement, and if it is something that you will address, given that it is one of the most pressing issues of our
Yeah, and so in the full plan itself, and I probably should have said this before, we don't have the larger plan printed out for sustainability reasons. We didn't want to do that. So if you go to the QR code, it will take you to a PDF of the plan. We'll also be sending out, if you go to the website, there's a place where you can request the plan. We'll be sending it to some units in smaller batches. But in the plan itself, we do talk about Governor's Island. We do talk about the importance of climate. I mean, I mentioned the sustainability goals as a metric. We were careful about being very specific about individual things. We probably didn't mention quantum or AI as much as we might focus on some of those things. But I think the way the plan is laid out and the investments we've already started to make, it is 100% that this is going to be a major focus of what we do. And listen, that might be some of the good feedback, that, hey, listen, you thought that would do that, but it really hasn't. So that's where the annual action plan, we get very specific about it. So I believe we have what's there to create that environment, but if not, then we're open to thinking about those other specifics. Thanks. Okay, so we're going to have to do an audible because we have 7 minutes. So did you make up an audible or should I? I will hand it over to Christy Henderson.
Okay, I'm going to throw the audible. Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Henderson. I'm Chief of Staff, and I'm the Christy who's been referenced several times. So what we're going to do instead, we were going to have a group activity, but this was a really robust conversation and questions. So for everyone who's RSVP'd, I'm going to send a form that's basically the same as some of the questions we were going to ask during the conversation. And it's really just about, after you've seen what we've laid out in the plan, what are some of the ideas that maybe started to come to mind? What are some of the additional questions that you have? So if we have your email address because you RSVP'd, you will get a copy of that form. It might be tomorrow because there's been a lot going on today, but we will make sure that you get that soon. So, and thank you to everyone who's been on the live stream today.